welcome everybody to this week's live show. Just as a reminder, we are going to be talking about negotiating and all of that good sort of stuff. And if you haven't already, we do have the conversation guide, which if you haven't got it, Kylie is going to be dropping in the link. So first of all, for those of you that haven't met her, say hi, Kylie, to everybody. So Kylie is your chat / link / question person. We are a double duo here. So if you have any questions or anything like that, pop them in chat. Kylie will be there to answer. And if I throw out any craziness throughout the show, which if you have been before, you know I tend to do a tiny bit because it's a little bit of a let's go on an adventure together experience. She will be pulling extra resources as we go through. So what is going to happen today? Because this is, I will say, a very, I'm not even sure how to describe this. This is a very complicated topic around negotiations as a whole, because if you really want to get good at it, it actually takes an enormous amount of practice and thought. And there are hundreds and hundreds of books out there about how to negotiate. And it is a skill that happens over time. And so what I am approaching the conversation about this week is based on this whole idea that the future you is who people want to buy from you. What are some of the things that I think are not being said out there about the whole idea of negotiating? And what are the things that I'm constantly having conversations with? So the first part of the show, we're going to talk about the brilliant future you and some ideas and some constructs that I think will be useful for you as you think about negotiation. And you will notice that I am not necessarily saying money negotiation, but negotiation in general. Then we are going to shift into the winning wheel. So for those of you that haven't been before, if you come to one of these live shows, we spin the wheel for everybody who is registered, and one lucky person gets to have a one-on-one with me. FYI, Peggy, I don't know if you saw your inbox, but you were the winner last week. So congratulations to you. Look forward to getting a catch up. Then we are going to open up for Q&A around unique use cases, because what's really hard about negotiation is they are unique use cases. So if you've got questions, tee them up in chat. We're going to have a little bit of time to ask. And then, of course, as always, we are going to be throwing out the challenge to everybody at the end of the show on how can you take a baby step? Because one of the things that Kelly and Kylie and I have all been talking about recently is what is it we want for all of you? And while we are all about sharing ideas and how to navigate the future you and all of that good sort of stuff, what we want is for you to do stuff. Because when you do stuff, things start to happen. And we get that you need to go through phase one of learning about an idea and uncovering all of the nuances of an idea and then figuring out what you want to do with it. But ultimately, if you don't do anything, nothing actually changes. So it's a challenge that we are going to continue to put out. And we're also doing a lot of work behind the scenes, building out new ways to play with us in the new year, because we are going to be creating some experiences that are specifically built around how to build more confidence in yourself, how to tap into your ambition some more, and all sorts of other things as you take back 2020, because I don't know about the rest of you, but this dumpster fire of the dumpster fire of this year I'm kind of done with, and I'm about taking it back. So we're going to be talking about a lot more of that, not only today, but in future shows through the end of the year. So what do I want to start with? Let me just see. I think I had slides for you on this. Yes, I did. I only have one because I wanted to get the headlines out to you. Let me share that with you. Okay. So first of all, let's get around the construct of the negotiation. And there's a couple, well, there's 5 actually, really core ideas that I hope you take from today's session. Really starting with the one that if you've been to any of my shows or any of my events before, you will know, is that in this working world, you are loaning your time to people in the future. That is literally the product that people are, for lack of a better expression, buying from you. So if you are trying to get a job or you're trying to get a promotion, the thing that you want to be able to do is do something. Your time in the future is the thing that people are buying. And so as I think about negotiation as a whole, or just the whole, how do I get paid? How do I go through that whole thing? That's the very first thing I think about is, okay, the product that I want people to buy, borrow, whatever the word is, for money, not money, depends on the situation, is my future time. And you will hear me say this a ton because I think it's really important. Like, you think about why you are friends with somebody. It's because when you first met, and as you have met over time, your brain has said, oh my God, you are super fun and I want to do future shenanigans with you. Same thing in the workplace, just we get paid for it, I would hope, in the same place. So one, this whole idea that you are actually the product. And I know for a lot of people, you're like, ooh, that's kind of icky. Maybe, and I would suggest you start thinking about how to get unicky on it, because if you are not owning what the product is and what it is you want to put out there, other people are choosing for you. And for those of you that have had jobs where you're like, ugh, this is not what the job description said, I hate this, or this is not what I expected, it's usually because the product they wanted to buy and the product you wanted to sell were 2 different things. How many of you have had an opportunity like that where you were like, ooh, not a good fit, right? That's the misalignment. And you'll hear me say, the clearer you are about who you are, what it is you want, and why that thing is awesome, the easier it is for people to say yes to you and the happier they are with a product. So imagine for a second, I'm just going to pick up my very boring pen. Imagine for a second you bought this pen from me, and what I didn't tell you is that it was almost out of ink. You'd be kind of pissed at me. Same thing. So if the ink of you, they need to understand what is the ink of you, or if the ink came out as a different color other than black, we'd have problems. So really think about that as a first idea around this. The second idea I want to share with you is this idea that a negotiation is an adventure. And if you take it on as an adventure, and I say adventure because there's going to be moments that are going to feel weird. There are going to be moments where you don't know what's going on or what's around the bend. There's going to be moments when you are aligned with the person, and there's going to be moments when you are on different trails entirely. But if you put it in the adventure mindset, it is much easier to make mistakes, back up, try again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The third thing I'm going to talk about is also the idea that this is a double-sided marketplace. In this world of you are loaning your time to somebody, you get to choose to loan it to people, and they get to choose if they want to buy it. We are going to talk about how you need to own that, yes, you actually get to say yes and no in this, and coming into how do you build confidence in this area. And then last but not least, we're also going to talk about hidden decision makers. I find so often that many people think that there's just one person making the decision about compensation, and there's a whole bunch of other people. So let me stop that for a second. And we are going to talk about the adventure first. So within this construct of an adventure, question to folks in the room: how many of you believe that the negotiation process starts at the offer? Where do you, so now I'm going to throw people in the deep end because you know I love to do that. Gwen, when do you think the negotiation process starts?
I think when you first make contact, and when by first making contact, when you realize that, when you become aware that it's an opportunity.
Yeah, It's a good one. Anybody else have any other opinions about when the negotiation starts? Kelly? We need you unmuted to be able to hear your brilliant brain.
When you say negotiation, do you mean it has to involve the other party? Because I was thinking like the moment you hear about the job description, you have to negotiate with yourself on like whether or not.
Sure. I think it's a little bit of what Gwen just said. Yeah. I would actually suggest that when you think about, so we're going to come back to that same idea that you are a product that somebody wants to purchase in the future, right? When you think about that whole thing, where negotiation actually starts, slightly more horrifying, is that moment that they decide they even want to write a job description. So put yourself for a second in that room that nobody is in this room at the moment. The first thing in the hiring process is somebody goes, you know what, we have a problem we need to solve in the future. And there is either an internal resource that we want to take out of a role and put into a new one to do this, to solve this problem, AKA we need to backfill that position, or we have a whole new problem that we need a specific set of talents and needs for. And that conversation happens before the recruiter is told, before the job description is written, before all of that sort of thing. The other thing that happens at that point is there is absolutely at least an idea of budget. So this is the first thing. Anybody who tells you, oh, you know, we don't actually have a budget for this, absolute hooey. Everybody has a budget in their head about how much, what is the range of what it is and what they're willing to spend. And granted, if you're talking to a super startup, early stage company, they might not have process and procedure and all of that good sort of stuff in place. But if you are talking to a company with an HR department, as an example, or with a finance department, I guarantee you there has been a conversation internally about what is the budget range that they have for this role and where are some guidelines around where you can have wiggle room. So the whole pricing process actually starts right at that point where they're like, oh, hang on a second, we need another human. Now, the question then becomes, is it a pricing process that is we need another human that never existed before, ergo, do we need to go find out what that price should be? Or is it we've actually been hiring for this role for a while and we've actually got some historical mathematics around this? What they're also doing in that negotiation is starting to think around what are the characteristics of the person that we need to fit this role. And again, there's kind of two adventures on this one. There's the we are backfilling a role we have hired before, so we've actually got some helpful information about who this person is and what they're like. Or there's the, we have no idea who this person is and we're going to have to start guessing. And so what does this mean for you on your adventure? It's understanding as soon as you see the job description. And I know we had a show on a previous episode where we actually talked about unpacking the job description and seeing if you can find out whether this is a backfill role. And so do they have insight and data? And if so, they're really going to know what the budget is. Or is it a brand new role and they don't? And I do think it's a bit like, I'm going to have more props from Joanna today. Like if I was selling you a water bottle, my guess is most of you, I find water bottles frightfully expensive, would expect maybe around a $20 to $50 range, right? Because we've all bought water bottles. Kind of depends where you're shopping. If you're going to Walmart, maybe, you know, $10 to $15. Depends on the store, correct? So you should be able to get an idea of what is the financial package looking like. So that's the first thing. And this is why I say to everybody in thinking about how you go through the process of negotiation, your buyer has been prepping for this purchase process for quite some time. It is a rare scenario where somebody has had a job description open for like 24 hours and post it, and suddenly you're in the interview process. So like, I think you can comfortably guess that a hiring team has at least got about a 3-week advantage on you. And they are absolutely doing the market research and the prep for that. And it's either based on market research that they already have based on the role, or they're going out to people and asking, which is why, similar to selling any product, you need to go out and do the prep work and say, like, what do I think their market rates are? Get onto Glassdoor and some of the other tools that are out there to kind of see ranges, start to understand what pricing band they are on, understanding like what kind of company you're working for. So, are you going to work for a super early stage startup, which may not have a lot of money, but might have high equity? Versus are you going to go work for a company that has got very, like I think about Autodesk as an example, they have very, very clear hiring bands. So does Google. Some of these really big companies have some really structured information. And if you go look, you can find out that information really easily. And then you'll have like, I think about Netflix as an example. Netflix is known for paying, I think it's 50% premium over market rate, sometimes even more, because they want money to not be part of the conversation. So going out and finding that information and getting a prep sheet on not only on the roles and what is the information of the company. The other thing that I think is super important is similar, they've done all the prep. You also need to prep on yourself. And prepping on yourself is actually coming in and saying, okay, what do I think is the right rate for me? And there's a brilliant executive coach out there called Rebecca Zucker, who absolutely look her up, follow her, read all her stuff, because she's the one who actually taught me this really great advice. Is she once said to me, look, the first thing that you should do on your career journey and your negotiation is to figure out what is your good number and what is your, oh, holy shit, I'd be super happy number. You will notice she does not talk about what is the bottom end. She goes, what is your good number? And she goes, your good number is, what is the number that if you got paid that, you'd be like, this is okay. I'm good. My needs are taken care of. It's also, I would throw out there, your walkaway number, because I don't think any of you should discount yourself unless the non-financial compensation elements are fantastic. This is the other piece on the prep, is not only what are the financial pieces that you should think about that are good for you, but then what are all of the non-financial things? So equity or profit sharing or 401ks or health insurance might be an important one for you. Like, what is their benefits package? Do they let you work from home? All of those things are really important. And you'll notice in your conversation workbook that I've actually put a bunch of different things in there for you to consider and say, like, what is my good enough number? And what is my, this is fantastic number? And I'm going to explain to you why I want you to have the, this is fantastic number in just a second. But the what is good enough number really starts to anchor on what are the numbers that you're going to want to come to, and how do you actually evaluate that with whoever it is you are negotiating with. So just starting there. What else did I want to talk about here? And yeah, so really thinking about like, what is the compensation package for you, and having that written down and validation that you actually feel confident that you are worth all of this. How many of you feel like you are being paid fairly for what it is you do? Oh, awesome. Good. So all of you, not everybody, but all of you have gotten good enough numbers. Which is fantastic. Like, that's actually the goal. This is the other really, when you think about negotiation, we often put it as an adversarial conversation, and it feels a little bit adversarial because it's us against them, right? One of the greatest pieces of advice I got was from a guy named Martin Green when I was still at CNET, and I was doing my first big negotiation with a big company. And he said, look, if you remember that actually you want to be on the same side of the table at the end of the negotiation, you'll approach the adversarial moments with collaboration, because he said, always look at how you're playing the long game. But he as well said, look, thinking about what it is you want and what is the value of what it is you want is really important, which leads me to the second piece of the value conversation. All of us, when we are going on our career adventure, are stepping into a new role for a reason. And that reason might be it's creating an opportunity for you to grow. It's creating an opportunity for you to get out of a bad situation. It may be an opportunity that, like if it's a startup, there's an upside opportunity there. It may be because you want to pivot careers, geography, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things, because again, the people who are buying you are thinking about what are the criteria for them in the future, actually list out what are the things that are valuable to you. I think it's really important. And it is totally fine to get a little crazy with those requirements. So as an example, I'm just going to use myself. When I was negotiating with Pandora on my compensation plan, on my list of stuff that I wanted were two things. One, I wanted to be out in front on international expansion. And this was before the company was even talking about it, specifically in Asia, because I wanted to go back there. The second thing is in my previous role, this is getting awfully in the weeds, but as an example of how crazy you can get, in my previous role I've been a road warrior princess for most of my career, had a relationship with American Airlines for many, many years and was a frequent flyer and had all sorts of status and all sorts of good stuff. And when my previous company had been acquired, the company had required me to move over to United Airlines. And I was not a happy camper, because anybody who manifests the whole upgrade situation and points with airlines, having to switch airlines is a big no-no. And I got burned by that whole thing and I was still mad. And so I was like, okay, either they needed to guarantee, because I know this is possible, status on an airline if they forced me to fly an airline, or I would have a carve out in my contract that allowed me to stay flying on American Airlines. Yes, you can ask for crazy stuff like this. It does not hurt. And that's why I say, like, thinking about like what is important to you in like, what is it I want to learn? How do I want to be compensated? What are the opportunities for me? What are the things that are important to me are really important to list out. So things like, do you want to work for an organization that has budget to allow for personal development, as an example? Another thing that you can list out, because that then gets put into your "this would be awesome" conversation. Because in the negotiation process, naturally what happens is they come to you and they go, "We want you to come work for us." Yay! FYI, very big buying signal. And then they will make you an offer. You absolutely should come back with a response to the offer. But what I do, and this is why I say, like, what is your best case? Come back with what is your "I would be super happy" number at a minimum, and then add at least 2 to 3 "what are my crazy asks" stuff. And crazy ask can literally be, I would like to have a budget for personal development. If you're already doing a personal development thing, like I'd love this to be funded. I have seen people negotiate car service for themselves. I've seen people negotiate executive coaches for themselves. I've seen people at much senior levels actually negotiate that their executive assistant become as part of the package and actually pre-negotiate their compensation. Now, granted, I will say that was at a fairly senior role, but you can get more creative about all of the things that you can ask. I've also recently had people ask if it's okay to negotiate the layoff and or furlough expectations with an organization. I absolutely had one of our clients say, look, I'm about to go through the interview process. Is it okay to ask them what is their layoff and furlough process? I know lots of us have seen that impact lots of our friends recently. And I said, yeah, absolutely, you should ask. However, do not be prepared for them to have a clear answer to you. I've talked to lots of HR people and shared this little insight with them, and they all looked at me with a look of complete horror and said, oh my God, no. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, they should be asking, because you can pre-negotiate your exit package on the way in. It's a bit like a prenup. And I'm not going to ask any of you if you have actually gone through the whole prenup process, but that's what I want you to think about as you're going through this negotiation. As the other thing, so I talked about like doing the pre-work and figuring out what it is you want, but then also having things that are uniquely important to you that you can add on. Because here's the thing about the whole backwards and forwards that I always try to stick by. We as human beings like choice, but not too much choice. If you think about, like, if I made you all go to the grocery store right now and look at the toothpaste aisle or the peanut butter aisle or the, oh my God, the cereal aisle, it's unbelievably overwhelming. Way too much choice. This is why Trader Joe's actually does really well, because they're like, this is the toothpaste. However, we do like to choose. And this is where I come in and say, when you are going through the negotiation process, always have what I call the chocolate and vanilla approach. And chocolate and vanilla is, we all want ice cream. And if you go to 37 flavors, too many choices. But if you said, I want chocolate or vanilla, you'd be all like chocolate or vanilla. If you are just coming back and saying, here is my offer, and it's a single thing, then the choices people are going to make are yes and no. Very simple way of approaching this. So coming in and saying, so you've got all of the stuff that you want in your career. So somebody has made the first offer, which is what they generally do. Then coming back and saying, look, I would really like these other things. I would be happy with either A or B option. And whatever your A and B is fine, but it should be whatever they offered plus some more stuff. And it could be, as in my case, the American Airlines example, which is a little crazy, but I did get it. Or it could be a financial thing. And you will find that because you have given people options, they will try to figure out how to say yes to everything else. They will try to figure out how to say yes to everything else. I'm just going to put that out there. Like, what was the worst that could happen for me? They could have said no. Like, I care. Not that much, but enough that I put it on there. But it was absolutely ability for them to be able to say no to some pieces and yes to some pieces. So really think about, as you are like making yourself an A-B choice, because that allows them to say, look, we're going to make this one happen or that one happen. Inevitably, as I've gone through this exercise with lots and lots of people, what ultimately happens is the final offer is a hybrid. And it's a hybrid of their original offer plus your A and B options, because they're not going to be able to say yes to absolutely everything. So start thinking about, what does that package look like before you even start applying for jobs? Because the more comfortable and confident you are with what that package looked like and what the elements are in that, the easier it is going to be for you to ask for it. Here's my other pro tip on this. You should not be doing this ask the first time with the person offering you the job. Should not be. Go find, in very Joanna fashion, go find 4 or 5 people that are in decision-making roles. So this is probably not your besties. These are people who maybe a level up and say, hey, I want to practice negotiating my salary with you. Will you be my practice person? And actually bring in a real job description that they can play off. Actually have them help you go through the, like, what do they think the right budget for that is? And then go through the process of practicing. I promise you that if you've practiced it 4 times with people that you already know and trust, when the actual time happens, you will have already worked through probably every single use case and every single scenario, and will have ultimately more confidence in yourself as you go through. So don't leave negotiation until the last thing. And I get that it is super scary and not a lot of fun and people don't like to do it. It's because we're out of practice. And the more you practice on it, the easier it becomes. So something to think about. Looking at my notes. Okay, last thing I want to share on kind of the prep. And this is a lot of, because many of you who are going through either the programming or coming to the shows are going through career pivots. One of the other things in negotiations that I always ask people to prep for are, what are the potential objections? How many of you have heard me talk about the Hermes bag objection conversation, or we've got a bunch of new people? I'm seeing no hands, so I'm guessing no. Okay. Here is the interesting thing about objections. So objections are basically reasons why not something should happen. So when you are going through, well, I will equally say there's absolutely zero harm in asking. If you know that one of your asks is going to make somebody feel it's going to be difficult for somebody, or you know is an obstacle that you need to get over. And I say, for the people who are pivoting specifically, your obstacle is that you are not the obvious candidate. And so as an example, if I was going into I'm going to pitch the product of me, negotiation process with me, and I was pivoting, I would probably say the sentence, you know, I'm not probably your obvious candidate, but what I'd like is the opportunity to explain to you how actually that because I'm not the obvious candidate, I'm actually the best candidate. So I just objection handled, in essence, the why not me, because I don't look and sound like the person you think you should do. And let me explain the Hermes. So when we are purchasing something, we have an idea of price, we have an idea of what it is, we have all sorts of ideas ahead of time as we go through. And so I am going to take you all as an example to New York City with me, because we are going to go shopping at this store called Hermes. Now, I know you all know well, actually, let me check. Does everybody know what an Hermes bag is? The Birkin bag specifically? For those of you that don't, they are crazy expensive. But I think it's a good example. So when you are going to Hermes, let's just pretend you don't know who they are. If I walked up to an Hermes store and said, oh my God, Hermes is having a sale, we should go in and see if we can get a nice Birkin bag. And we walked in and went up to a bag and saw that even on sale, it's $25,000. You would probably look at me and go, like, have you lost your mind? $25,000 for a bag is a spectacular amount of money. What are you doing here? Whereas same scenario, you don't know what Hermes is, you've never heard of a Birkin. As we are walking up to the store, I go, hey, we're going to go into Hermes. The bags in there are spectacularly expensive. They start around $50,000 to $100,000 for just a bag, but they're having a sale. And if we go in, we might actually be able to see one that isn't that spectacular a price. And we go in and then we see a $25,000 bag. How many of you are like, oh, not so expensive after all, right? That is, I overcame the objection of price just in my little narrative up front saying, this is going to be spectacularly expensive, but it is all worth it. And B, I also used another technique that's in negotiation called price anchoring. So I said 50 to 100,000, the purse came in at 25, seemed like a deal. But price anchoring was one of that. This is why when I talk about negotiation, I always recommend people either read books or listen to things about how professional negotiators think about conversations, because it is a skill and there is art to it in helping people see beyond the details. It's not something where you can see and do these 10 things and magical things will happen. That said, and I know, who was it who asked on the pre-survey, which by the way, thanks everybody for that. Who was it who asked about how to respond to what if they ask you your salary requirements? Is it anybody who was on this call? Oh, you're gonna have to tell me how to say your name so I do not do it incorrectly. Amalia, is that correct? No? And we still have a mute. Well, anyway, I think this is
sorry, it's Amy.
Amy.
No, I asked, my question was, you know, because I've run into negotiations with employers. I'm in the Bay Area, in other parts of the country, and I feel like I've priced myself out because of the area, and I'm coming from like Bay Area salary. And so my new tactic, I don't know if it's working very well, has been like, well, what's the budget? You know, and then seeing if it works from there.
Yeah.
But I'm still looking. So
yeah. Like this is where, and this is again why I say it's really important to practice this, is you're going to have to tap into some inner confidence and some inner bravado. Is if somebody's coming to you and saying, well, what are your salary ranges? What they're in essence asking is, can we afford you? Right? And by also, there's a phrase in sales where he who speaks first loses when it comes to price, which I also kind of keep in my back pocket here. And so I know that because they have a job description up there, they have a budget range. And so my response, similar to Amy's there, is, well, let's be real. Really, you're trying to find out if you can afford me. And I also know that there's a thing called price anchoring, and that if I share my range, then I'm anchoring at my range, and that may stop the conversation. And the reality is that the decision about how much money you are willing to spend for this role has already been made. So why don't you share with me the budget, and I'll let you know if that's within wiggle room. So the little bit of kind of calling out the bullshit, right? Now, how many of you are like, I could totally say that. I feel super confident in saying that. Awesome, Gwen. Okay, so a couple of you guys. If you're not, the easiest way to get good at saying it is say it out loud to people who do not matter. Like you all know that and Kelly will have to put in the chat when it actually gets, we do share these videos after the fact, so that you can go back and say, what exactly did Joanna say? It's fine to say exactly the same thing. But saying it out loud at least 5 times to random people, even in a non-negotiation situation, will 1, give your mind-body connection practice doing it, and 2, will actually teach your brain that you can say it out loud. Like this is in all negotiation, coming in and being confident about the value that you bring to the table and what your asks are, and saying it out loud before you have to say it to somebody is always the best thing to do. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add to this. No, those were the biggies, because I actually want to flip over to Q&A. Yeah, so why don't we flip over to it's the Wheel of Awesome first. So let's see who's going to win stuff this week. Kylie, are you ready to spin the wheel of fantasticness? Who is going to win goodies?
Share my screen. It's thinking.
We'll give it a second. Well, while it's thinking, and the other thing on all of this negotiation that I want you guys to remember is this is a double-sided marketplace. You get to choose too. And this is why I come back to like really think about the prep and what it is you're worth and all of that good sort of stuff, because you should absolutely never sell yourself short, ever. And that's what important. I know that like getting the job and all of that good sort of stuff is tough, but have a good idea of your value and what you're worth. Okay, Kylie, let's spin the wheel. So many colors, so many names. There we go. And
there we go, Kelly.
Kelly, hey, is our winner this week. So Kelly, I know that you are going through the value experience at the moment, which is fantastic. I can't remember where you are along your adventures, but here's what I suggest you do. We're going to send you information on how to schedule your one-on-one. Pro tip for you specifically, let's wait until you're done with challenge 3. And I've actually had to create your value language, because what we'll use that half hour to do is to refine your value language and give you a bit of a practice session with it. So I think that's a really good use case for you as you're going through the adventure. Because using it before we've got all of that, like you're going to maximize your time with me. So just a heads up there. But we will, either way, we'll give you the link on how to do that. So excited and looking forward to it. Yes. Awesome. Okay, so why don't we open up to Q&A real quick. Kylie, do we have any questions coming through from chat?
Yeah, we have a few questions in chat. The first one is from Jessica, and she's asking if the price can be too high, like i.e. it's too fantastic, and she's concerned that it's too high of a range for her skills.
Well, so Jessica, you want to unmute so we can chit chat here?
Yeah, the idea that I might be in the wrong band, like I'm being perceived so awesomely that I'm concerned that there's a disconnect between what the offer is really about.
Now, are you talking about you're overqualified for the role, or are you talking about you're overpriced for the role?
I would be potentially underqualified or have serious concerns about executing something at an executive level that I don't feel I have a handle on yet, that made me feel that perhaps I misunderstood the level they thought I was coming in at.
Okay. Let me start by saying you should always go for the stretch goal.
Okay.
Jessica, you and I have had some chats. You're smarter than you think. And I also know that little asshole in your head does a bit of a number on you periodically, right?
Yeah.
Tell them, remember, 70% of that nonsense is nonsense.
Okay.
And are you pulling yourself out of the race because of the conversation you're having with you? Or are you pulling yourself out of the race because of the conversation they're having with you?
Okay.
So that's the first thing that I want to share, because you're better than you think. And if somebody else believes you have the potential to do something, well, why on earth would you tell them no? Just saying. Right. So, and if you get paid fantastically in the process, then brava. That said, I do come back and say this is a double-sided marketplace. Like, you know what you are really great at and what ultimately makes you happy. I had a delightful conversation with a woman earlier this week who, when we were talking about her goal, so what did she want the future her to be? She said, oh, well, I need to be a VP and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, why? Like, what is the win for you? Talk to me about your adventure and where it is you're going. And we had a really fascinating conversation about, in her case, who did she want to be when she was 40? And in the process, realized that she actually doesn't want any of that. She doesn't want the title is just what she thought should be the next step. And actually crafting her own life, and what were the elements for the life and what was the kind of work that she wanted to do, looked very different. And so while compensation, so we had a very separate conversation on who did she want to be and the compensation that goes along with it that wasn't necessarily title based. And so it's figuring out, like, her actually taking the step and saying, hang on a second, I want to be taken out of the consideration set for VP, allowed us to figure out how to teach the people who were going to say yes to the future you, who exactly it is she wanted to be. And only you can know who that is and what's right for you. I will also caveat there that who you want to be in the future also changes over time. So what is your grow opportunity versus your financial opportunity versus your impact opportunity? I always look at those three things kind of equally important for you to consider. So if it doesn't help you grow in the way that you want to grow, Jessica, and it doesn't help you have impact in the way you want to have impact in the future, then I would say, then yeah, pull yourself out of the ring. If it's just about this guy, what's it going to hurt throwing your hat in the ring and going for it? Right? Okay. Other questions, Kylie?
Yes. So we have a question from Lindsay. She's asking, what questions or expectations do you ask regarding a discretionary bonus?
That's a really good. Is this for sales comp or like give me a bit of construct?
Yeah. So my main concern is I'm extremely untrusting at the moment based on past history. And so, there's a range. You understand what the base should be. You understand what your overall comp should be. And how you get between your, the end of the base to the overall comp. Mm-hmm. and how that's phrased, and I'm sure it just has to do with how it's executed in the contract, to me is really crucial. And so I'm just thinking about what kind of question should I be asking as to that, and what is, and also I guess it's the question of what is considered success, right?
Right. Is this for a sales position or is it for
The capital raising position.
Oh, yeah, that's super tough because the capital raising position is technically, like if you think about the financial construct, is a sales position.
Sure.
And I think like what you know, I'm sure I'm not preaching to the choir here, is comp plans in sales roles change basically based on which way the wind is going on a regular basis. What I am a big fan of doing, again, this is a bit of objection handling. I don't need to know the whole, why are you, like clearly you've been burned in the past, hence the no trusting.
Mhm.
I think it's totally fine to come out and say, like, and I think this is actually for all of you guys, if somebody has gotten to the offer stage with you, they have chosen you. The power is actually much more back in your court to say, look, this is what, because if they've gone through the whole process of choosing you, you're going to have to be super awful for them to say, oh, never mind, we don't want to choose you anymore. You really are. If they've gone through that whole process and you've really been thoughtful about the process along the way. So this is why I say tap into your courage. And so I would say, Lindsay, in your situation, I would really say to them, look, I'm going to be really upfront here. The reality is you already know that I am really good at what I do and I deliver on results.
Mhm.
Like what are the KPIs and what are the measures of success from my side of the house? Super clear. The reality is when I have taken these kinds of roles in the past, what is the value and what are the KPIs for the organization have not always been as clear. And quite frankly, it's come back and kicked me in the ass sometimes. So this time around, it's important to me to be able to move forward that we have understanding of value on both sides of the equation. And so what can you do to create language or guidelines that actually mean that we have something that we both are excited about?
Mhm.
And literally throw it back in their court, but give them a bit of like, look, I'm not an idiot here. And actually use that. It's again, a bit of it's a reverse objection handle in that one, but actually call it out. And this is actually, and I will share the story. I was interviewing for a job back in the mid to late 2000s, which for those of you that were in the tech industry, San Francisco was not an awesome place to be during that period, similar to a lot of right now. People were getting laid off a dime a dozen. And I was interviewing with this company who, for a really exciting role, I was going to have huge impact. So the grow and the impact were super high and financially was fine. However, the company was located in New York City. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that relocated to New York City was not what I wanted to do. And I was like, look, I would be excited to have this role, but it needs to be based in San Francisco. And in the negotiation, I said, look, in the contract or in our offer letter, I need it to say that I will not be required to relocate to San Francisco and that I can continue to work out of New York and I can continue to work out of the San Francisco office. We probably went backwards and forwards on this one issue for 3 weeks. And it went all the way up to the CEO. It came all the way back. It went all over the place. And I stood firm because I was like, no, I need to have this language because because I'd seen it happen too often. If I had gotten the job, I could see them saying, look, if you don't move to New York, we'll then end up letting you go. And then I'd end up without a job in San Francisco, which is not a good situation. So I stuck firm on this. What I found out from the recruiter eventually, because I ended up walking away from the deal and absolutely have like, what are your walk away things? Ended up walking away from the deal. The recruiter finally called me back and said that the CEO from the beginning part of the negotiation had said, look, this is going to be a role in New York City and we'll just make a move in 6 months, and was not willing to tell me that in the negotiation process, which I was like, well, now I know, A, this is not a company I would want to work for. And B, I'm really glad I stick to my guns. And this is, again, because I had prepped on what was important to me and what were my walk away and what were my where can I wiggle stuff, meant that I was able to stick to my guns and actually dodged a bullet in the process. Other questions we have?
No more questions in the chat.
Anybody else have a question that has come up as I've been chatting about all sorts of good stuff? Yes, Jessica.
Yeah, so just to kind of phrase this a little bit delicately, because it actually happened. So I'm in Silicon Valley. I was talking to a recruiter, so I had confidence in the recruiter. And the long story short was, she started out with saying, well, we can't afford Silicon Valley prices. And I said, okay. And I said, what's your budget? And she told me a number. And then I had to do the mental talk to my, as you put it, asshole in my head and say, it's a recruiter. She's on the same page as me. She wants me to get as much compensation as I can. She gets, she wants to have, she's both sided, right?
Yep.
But in my mind, I thought, yeah, but if it was an internal person, I'd feel that much more concerned that she was anchoring me at a place that was inappropriate, which, by the way, was 25% more than I was making when I thought I was paid adequately here. So to your point, but yeah, and they had lots of intangibles going with it too. But so that's a question that I have is there a way to gauge the gamingness of the internal recruiters that would be a tell that anyone could look out for, or is it just wrestling with getting good data ahead of time to have some idea what their price bands are?
Has layers in your question. So one, I have a new mantra for you that I want you to say every morning when you get up and look at yourself in the mirror. And I actually want everybody to do this, but Jessica specifically, because you've now had 2 examples where you're saying I shouldn't get paid as much as I should, is I want you to wake up every morning, look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am worth every single penny that people are willing to pay for me. Every single one. Revenue is oxygen, folks. Revenue gives you the freedom to do the stuff that you want to do. I don't know about how many of you, I've been broke in my life, and I'll tell you, it makes life a lot scarier and a lot harder when you do not think you have got the cushion. You absolutely should get every penny that you deserve. So there's that first thing. So one, that is your new mantra. We're going to get you a t-shirt with that on there. Second of all, on gaming the system, this is what I mean by, I don't actually think negotiations are a game. And in reality, if you think about the red flags to look out for are the people being shady and cagey with you in the interview process? Is the company selling a shady or cagey product? Are they, those are the red flags to look out for. If they seem like people that you want to work with, and that they would be fun to collaborate with, and they've got a product that you're excited about and a role that you're excited about, the reality is they're evaluating you against those same 3 things at the same time. I actually believe that our intention is actually much purer. And because of all of the angst and narrative around negotiations and that there are these very adversarial things, actually puts a dark cloud against something that doesn't need a dark cloud. And if you are upfront, clear, and value-based, it actually moves all of those dark clouds out of the way and actually means that you're in the same place. And, as much as I am sometimes not a fan of what a lot of Sheryl Sandberg says, I am a fan of her messaging that she said around negotiations, in that the one time that you are on opposite sides of the table is in the negotiation, but it's to get to a place where you're on the same side of the table. And she actually says that up front, like when people push back, she actually talks about that up front. And especially, and I will put this only because we've got a lot of awesome lady people on the call today. As women, yes, statistically, are we not supposed to negotiate for ourselves? Do people react badly to that? As an example, I will say and I have been known to say in interviews, again, this is why you practice this stuff out loud. I will say things like, look, I know in the negotiation process, most people react positively when a woman negotiates for a third party as opposed to herself. But I know we're having an honest and transparent conversation around the value of the future me. And so I'm going to be honest and transparent about my value and what it is I want so that we can make this a really easy conversation. And that then puts it in a space of transparency, value, but then also planted that seed of, look, I get that as a woman, we're not supposed to do all of these sorts of things. So just there. Okay. So we have, as always, run out of time. So reminder to everybody, next week's live show is one of the standard, why are you awesome? And how do we talk about it? So we're going to be doing one of our live transformations, at least one in the show. So if you haven't seen that, do come and join us. And we'll be talking about why, for those of you who are new to it, do we need to talk about the future you, and how do you find out who that is, and how do you map a plan for them? And then how, most importantly, do we tell everybody? Because if people don't know you exist, they cannot choose you, a bit like Cinderella on the dance floor, right? So how do you think about all of that? We're going to have that shows next week. We've got more shows coming up through the end of the year. Spoiler alert, we have all sorts of new engagements and adventures that we are building behind the scenes for you to be able to take back and start to take ownership of your future in 2021. So we hope to see you there. Last thing, coming back to the challenge, get out there and beta test this, folks. Go find 3 or 4 people that you trust professionally and say, look, I want to practice negotiating with you. And you're just going to be the buyer of me. I don't actually need feedback. I just want to practice saying it out loud. Tell them that that's the goal and that feedback is not what you're looking for. Because in the first stage, you just want to get comfortable. You can get feedback once you've done it 3 or 4 times. So get out there and do it. Make sure in your practice that you are anchoring your value financially in the value of the future you as you go through that. And then last but not least, in your challenge, like, come up with 2 things that you would like that are a little crazy in your future role. And that's what I would love to hear from you. So either shoot me a note on LinkedIn, or tweet me, or send us a note at hello@theamplified.ab, because we would love to hear what creative things you would like as part of your compensation package in your next role, just as something fun, as an exercise. Thank you all for coming. As always, shoot us a note if you have questions, and I look forward to seeing you at a future show. Ultimately, we're here to help you figure out how to teach other people who the future you is, so that you can be you in the future. Because the clearer you are about who you are, what you want, and teach other people why that's awesome, the more likely you get to be you. I know, it's a bit of a circle. I'm Joanna, your potentialist and fairy godmother, and I wish you the very best. Thanks for coming.